Welcome to Read the Book First, a book to movie adaptation podcast. Today we'll be discussing Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë. Do you say Brontë or Bronte?
I've always said Bronte, but I've heard both.
I've recently heard a lot of people say Brontë, and now I'm second guessing myself, but I've always said Bronte.
Me too. Let's
Yeah.
stick with that if that's what we
Okay.
feel like
So
we've done before.
amazing. And this mysterious voice that you hear, listeners, is Spencer. She has returned to discuss Wuthering Heights with us. Welcome back, Spencer.
Thank you, Jenessa. So excited to be back.
Last season, Spencer and I discussed Sense and Sensibilities by Jane Austen, so go check out those episodes. But we'll be discussing a book that, not like too far in the distance from Sense and Sensibility in timeline when it was published, but very different in everything else. It's a common thing, and I know you've experienced this, I'm assuming. When someone says, "Oh, you love Jane Austen, you probably also love Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, right?" It's like everyone puts those two together. And this is the first Bronte book, well, what I did it again. This is the first, this is the first Bronte book I've ever read. I've attempted to read Jane Eyre multiple times. I've attempted to read Wuthering Heights specifically like at least four times and never got past chapter five. So this is the first time
Mhm.
I've actually read it. And after reading it, I'm like, how dare people recommend people who love Jane Austen this? I mean, yes, there's similarities in like culture and like the lexicon the book uses, but like content wise, no. What? I don't know. It
Yeah.
shocks me. It was a blast for me to read this. And I knew like the bare bones plot just from being in English classes throughout my university schooling,
Mhm.
but I didn't know a lot of what happened. And so it was very exciting for me. I'm assuming you've read this before.
I have, yes. Wuthering Heights and I have a long history. I believe the first Bronte book, well, I know the first Bronte book that I read was Jane Eyre. And my father's a literature professor. He actually read Jane Eyre aloud to me. And that was my first experience. And that was very special. He has an amazing voice, and hearing him narrate the book was amazing. And of course, for context, I'm also a Jane Eyre fan and have read that many times since. But it was sometime after that I picked up Wuthering Heights, and that's one that I read fully on my own. No one read it aloud to me. So my first experience was just reading it silently to myself and talking about the plot to my father. He also loved Wuthering Heights, and I've written about it since in classes. I've read it for classes, so it's been a number of times that I've returned to these
Hmm.
characters and to this setting, and every time I'm struck by something different and the experience is different.
Hmm.
And so it was a real pleasure to get to read it again. It's the first time I believe in two to 3 years, I believe, since I read it last.
I was just continually surprised by this book once I got past chapter five. When I read books that like are books classics or books that are in the canon or that would be uh you know assigned to you at a school or at a university course, it
Mhm.
I immediately want to sit there and like start analyzing as I'm reading, which I think is important if that's what you're trying to do, right? But I had to like force myself and be like, Jenessa, just read. Just be cozied up. It's the snowstorm outside. You're not leaving the house. Sit there and
Mhm.
just read. I put my phone in a different room and I read for 2 hours and I finally got into it. And then suddenly I was like, oh my
Mm.
God, why have I waited 30 plus years to read this book? And I'm glad I did, honestly, because if I had read this as a teenager, I'd be a different person.
Really?
Yeah, I don't have a big angsty part of me and never have, but I think if I had read this as a teenager, it would have like clicked and like hit some gear, and I would have been
Mm.
like, what if I was angsty? You know what I mean? Like there's an alternate
Yeah.
timeline version of Janessa that read this as a teenager and was angstier. Probably not actually angsty, just because I'm so the opposite of angsty as a
But
person. But yeah,
yeah, it
yeah.
would have altered your brain chemistry, as the kids say.
Yeah, yes, as the youth say. Thank you, youthful correspondent. Um, I and then also just within the context of pop culture, like obviously next episode we'll be talking about the Emerald. What's her last name? I always want to say
Emerald
Fennel.
Fennel.
Is it
Yeah,
Fennel like the
Fennel.
the plant?
Yep.
Um,
Fennel seed.
her adaptation, which we'll dive into that next week. And boy, howdy, can I not wait to talk
Oh
about
my
that.
goodness. Me
Uh,
too.
but so I knew going into this that this wasn't a lowercase romantic book, but I knew it was going to be gothic, and I knew it was going to be a capital romantic book, like the romantic
hmm
movement. And it's been years, like since honestly, since my university courses about romantic literature, that I've read any of the like romantic authors and stuff. And I think that was just so one of the things what I loved about reading this was like diving back into that genre and time period. I had to write this paper about the Sublime, and gosh, I wish I would have put this quote in. Like I was thinking about these assignments I did, almost 10 years
hmm
ago now. So that was really fun for me going into it.
That's wonderful that you were able to go into it with some of it that hadn't been spoiled for you yet. Like obviously, like you
Hmm.
said, you had read some of it and knew something about what happened in it from
Hmm.
classes you took. But being able to be surprised by the
Hmm.
book,
Yeah,
that's
and
something that's so hard to replicate sometimes.
yeah, and like as I was going through and annotating my book, also look how gorgeous this copy I have is.
Oh, that is
Isn't that
beautiful.
so pretty? Yeah,
I've got my academic. This is a Norton edition. So
I
it's got
love the
like all the
Norton edition.
footnotes and essays.
I'm a sucker for a Norton edition. If my
Love
bookstore
Norton.
had one, I would have grabbed one, but they had this one and I was like, it's beautiful. But
It
when I
is.
was annotating, and I would just, whenever I was like shocked by something, I just put a big exclamation point on the side. Like I just
Yes.
underlined an exclamation point. I didn't do any notes, and usually I do
Mhm.
comments so that when I reread it, um, I like can giggle at myself. Like I just put an exclamation point and then moved on.
Yes.
That's all I
That's one of my
did.
very
But
favorite ways to annotate. I do exclamation points and LOLs, and
yep.
those are probably the two that you see the most. Fewer LOLs in Wuthering Heights. Much
Yes, there's
fewer.
much fewer. I don't think I had any LOLs in this one. I definitely did in Sense and Sensibility, but not
Oh yeah.
in Wuthering Heights. Um, a a very brief summary of this book. Uh we have these two households. We have Wuthering Heights, and we have I shortened it in my brain, but what's the full thing called? What's the
Thrush
other
Cross
house?
Grange.
Thank you. Thrushcross Grange. I just call it the Grange in my head just to, and
Yeah.
when I was taking
The
notes,
Grange and
just
the
because,
Heights.
yeah.
hmm
Um, and uh some we have like I don't know how to do a summary. I don't know care about spoiling. I can spoil it. So we have Heathcliff and Kathy who grew up together. Again, this is a very short summary. They have like this really intense relationship, and then Kathy marries the neighbors at the Grange, and Heathcliff runs away and comes back a gentleman, and then there's revenge, and people are born and people die, and then there's eventually a quote happy ending of some sort, kind
hmm
of, but really it's a novel about obsession and revenge and trauma and breaking traumatic cycles.
hmm
And it was just a not a fun read. Fun is not the word. It was an entertaining read.
Yes, very engrossing. I feel like when I read
Yes.
it, like it like encircles me. Like I feel
Hmm.
like I just am like pulled into the momentum of this very,
Hmm.
stormy and kind of dynamic of the
Hmm.
novel.
Yeah. As I was reading this and like then reflecting on reading it, I think what really you know, I struggled to get into it is because it has the setup narrative where we have this outsider Lockwood coming in to rent Thrushgrove Grain. Did I say that right? Nope,
Thrush
Thrushgrove
Cross Grange. We could just call
Thrushcross
it the Grange for
Grain.
simplicity, maybe.
Yes, yes. I think that would be best. But he's coming to rent that and for like at least, I don't know, like 6 months, a year, something like that. And he goes to meet his landlord and neighbor Heathcliff at Wuthering Heights, and immediately everything is gloomy. Like they describe the moors because are surrounding it, the landscape, it's gloomy. There's these dogs that attack him, like these like
hmm
very distant other people that Lockwood thinks is like the help, but they're not really. And they just are like not talking to him and be like, sit here, I guess. Like
Yes. It's like the weirdest family dynamic that he walks
Hmm.
into, and everyone seems to hate each other.
Hmm.
It's like he's walked into a very tense situation, and his arrival has just made things even more tense among
Hmm.
these family members.
Yeah, and Lockwood is so he's and purposely it makes sense within the story's context, but he's so snotty and he's so judgmental, and he's
Hmm.
like, how dare they not even, oh no, curtsy. They don't say that, but like that's kind of the vibe he's bringing uh
Yes.
into this situation.
So he gets sick because he spends a
Yes.
night at the Heights and has
Yes.
a ghostly encounter, which is one of my very favorite scenes,
Yes.
where he is sleeping in a bedroom in this strange little kind of coffin-like bed space,
Hmm.
where everything is encircled by wood. And there's a window, and he has a really hard time falling asleep. And he's reading these weird sermons that he finds, and he has this nightmare. And then he hears this tapping on the window, and then he comes to awareness, or so he thinks, and he sees this young waif in the window,
Hmm.
and she wants to come in. And she has the same name as, or she says that she has the same name as the person who seemingly occupied this bed before he's in the bed. He notices
Hmm.
that all the books have this name Catherine scrawled all over it. Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine Linton, Catherine Heathcliff, all these different Catherines. And then suddenly he's seeing this, ghost who seemingly is Catherine, and she wants to
Hmm.
come in. This is her home, and he is in an utter panic at this.
Hmm.
Um, and I believe Heathcliff then runs in, 'cause
Yes.
he hears that his soon-to-be tenant is freaking out, um, and he basically gets really worked up himself,
Hmm.
because and there seems to be some connection between him and this Catherine, but
And he's
Lockwood
like,
doesn't know what that is
mm.
yet.
And he's like begging this ghost to come in, and he's like, my dear
Hmm.
Catherine, like come in, and I I was so surprised that the ghostliness would start so early. Like that's one of the first things that kind of
Hmm.
surprised me. Like I was expecting like eeriness and just like weird things kind of happening that we
Hmm.
could like lead the reader towards thinking of supernatural things. But it's
Yeah.
just like, okay, Lockwood's coming in to Wuthering Heights, gets attacked by dogs, ghost. Next scene, ghost. It's not like that quick, but it is pretty shocking, and it adds to the setting up Wuthering Heights as this like hellish place. And
Yeah.
that's, one of the major themes of the novel is with these locations, we have a lot of like heaven and hell,
Hmm.
very like either described or very literal from the character's dialogue. That Wuthering Heights specifically is described as hellish, and there's always you're like the devil's Satan is always mentioned when
Yeah.
characters are at Wuthering Heights, and
Yep.
it's really setting up that for Lockwood. But
Mm.
he does end up going back to because he's so frightened from the ghost situation that he goes back to the Grange, and it's during like a snowstorm, so he ends up getting sick. And
Yes.
and so that's when he ends up talking to Nellie, the house maid, who to describe the story of Heathcliff, his landlord, and also about these like portraits of people in the living room who end up being, we find out, um, Edward Linton and Catherine Linton.
Hmm.
And Nellie begins to tell the story. And as soon as I realized, and this is like a classic, way, especially, throughout Victorian literature, but also before, like a story within a story is a very popular framing
Yeah.
technique. And as soon as I realized it was the housemaid telling the story, I was like, oh, this is messy gossip. This is Real Housewives of Wuthering Heights.
Hmm.
And that's when I was like, oh,
Yes.
I'm in. As soon as
Oh
I
yeah.
realized that. And I think that's like the trouble it took me to get in was like the setup took a little bit for me to grasp. And this time, obviously, I was like, well, I have to read it because I'm doing a podcast episode about it. But once I
You're
got through, I was like,
committed.
oh, yes. I was like, oh, it's messy drama. She's gossiping. Yes,
Hmm.
I love it. Um,
Yes. And then you
Yeah.
get away from Lockwood too, because he is pretty insufferable. And
Yes.
when you realize that Nellie, the maid, the housemaid who used to be the maid at Wuthering Heights and knows
Hmm.
all about the history of these two families, when you realize she's going to be the narrator, it's like, okay, like this
Yeah.
is a lot more palatable.
Yes, exactly. Once we get away from Lockwood, and then whenever he has his like little interstitials, as like, I have been a little bit better. The doctor might be here. I was like, I don't care, Lockwood. You're not important. Move
No one
on.
cares,
Next.
Lockwood.
No one cares. Also the fact that he was having that freak out in that wooden coffin, it's I think, or coffin-like bed, is kind of ironic based off his name, Lockwood, because he's locked in
Yeah,
the wood.
he's locked into the wood.
Emily Brontë. I just did it
Hmm.
again. Emily Brontë. Some
Whatever's
TikTok
natural,
ruined my brain. It ruined my brain. So Nellie slowly starts to like tell all the stories, and it starts that she essentially grew up with Catherine Earnshaw and her brother Hindley Earnshaw, whose family have lived in Wuthering Heights for years and years. She was like one of the housemaid's daughters, so she grew up, being one of their like acquaintances, but also a member of the household. Lockwood specifically curious about Heathcliff because he's this mysterious man. He's described with like very dark features. He,
Hmm.
has this whole panic of like, oh, are you okay? Slash, let the ghost in. Like this situation that he's found
Hmm.
himself with Heathcliff. He's very curious about it. And Nellie talks about when Heathcliff was brought to Wuthering Heights, and we find out that Catherine and Hin Catherine and
Hindley.
Hindley's, yes, dad was off on business in Liverpool, and apparently, from what she's saying, found a child, an abandoned child, who uh, ends up being Heathcliff and brings him back to Wuthering Heights to live with them. And Heathcliff is described, as having dark features, dark hair, dark eyes. He is described as like what we would say Romani people now, whether or not that's what he actually is or was, is like very left up into interpretation, but for
Mhm.
sure he's not white. And there's so
Yes.
much, and I was just like doing some like brief Google scholaring because I don't have access to JSTOR or any other academic uh you know sites right now. I was just
Yeah.
going through and I'm like, okay, what do scholars think? And there's a lot of folks who just use this as, like, yes, he just is a mixed race kid because Liverpool's a port city, so it's full of immigrants, right? A lot
Hmm.
of people, scholars say that he might just be Irish because there's a big Irish population in Liverpool because of the port city, and
Hmm.
this is right before the famine. But also people are like, it's probably that Earnshaw had a kid with some random lady.
Yep.
And I think I like didn't put that together until I read that someone like briefly, and I was like, oh, of course. And that makes sense of why he immediately like cares for this child
Hmm.
and
And
brings him
why his wife is so mad when he brings this kid home because Mrs.
yeah.
Earnshaw is not a fan of Heathcliff.
Hmm. And neither are the kids at first too.
Right.
Like Hindley never is, but Catherine isn't either at first.
Hmm.
Um, and so we have poor young Heathcliff who doesn't even speak like English is described at this moment, or at least not the version of English that they speak, whether or not it just means that he has an accent, who knows. And even though Earnshaw, the father, has like treats him kindly and is very like loving towards him, Heathcliff is still just like set up to be obviously othered because he is against everyone else in the household, or everyone else is against him.
Hmm.
And it just gets worse and worse for him because Hindley is like constantly bullying him at this point. It's not full out abuse because they're still children. Um,
Hmm.
and it just like rolls out of control from there. But I don't know, I find it so interesting how him and Catherine end up becoming, because we learned more about Catherine, who's our main heroine for this part of the book at least.
Hmm.
Catherine is whatever the stereotype would be for how a young woman should be. Catherine is not that.
Yes. It's a good way of putting it.
Yes, she is. She loves, running outside. She loves being wild. She talks back. She's messy. She's um she's very physical. I mean, I think
Hmm.
every character in this book arguably is very physical. Um, but Kathy, because she's a girl, she's not supposed to be. She's supposed to be very,
Hmm.
have a good like demeanor and calm, but she's not, and she gets a lot of punishment from her dad because of this.
Yeah.
And that surprised me so early on, especially like when
Yeah.
they're like 12 at this point.
It is. There's a definitely this like, and this is introduced from the very beginning when Lockwood comes there, but there's a certain kind of untamed aspect of Wuthering Heights. Like it's in the Yorkshire moors, so like very like craggy, very quote unquote uncivilized. They use the word savage a lot, like really
Hmm.
kind of leaning into like the atmosphere as being like uncultivated. And Wuthering Heights, the family that lives there is, they're landed, they have money, and they've been there a long time, but they're not like genteel in quite in the way that somebody living in a city or in a like a more kind of further south within the country would be. Um, and so the childhood, it's like it's very hard to raise up a young lady in that environment when,
Hmm.
there's all this beautiful wilderness around you. And so there's a lot of just, frolicking and adventuring on the moors, which of course is very unladylike.
Hmm.
So Catherine really kind of grows up, and as does Heathcliff, and
Hmm.
everyone in that orbit ends up kind of in this environment. So as children, they take to that environment, even though that's
Hmm.
not the class, the class behavior that they're expected to perform.
Yeah. Does Finley go to university that early?
He does, yeah, because
Yeah.
he leaves a picture at pretty early in Nellie's narration when he's in his later teens. So
Yeah.
yes, he does leave the scene, and he's never quite as wild as Heathcliff and Catherine are.
Yeah.
He's a little bit more because he's the oldest son, right? Like he'll inherit, like he can't maybe
Hmm.
afford to be quite as
Yeah.
you know, quite as wild
But
as others.
before he even leaves, he like despises Heathcliff because he gets all his father's favor. And
Right.
attention. And so then there's this like Heathcliff versus Hindley dynamic. And so that's one of the reasons why Heathcliff and Kathy become fast friends is because they're
Hmm.
trying to avoid Hindley's bullying and
Yeah.
just Hindley in general. So then that's also why they hang out in the moors and go out in the freedom, literally out
Right.
there to get away from the bullying and the abuse of Hindley. But then he does end up going out of the picture to university. And uh, Heathcliff and Kathy end up spying on the next door neighbors, the Lintons, at Thrushcross Grange. And from my understanding, Thrushcross Grange is a much fancier home
Hmm.
than Wuthering Heights, right? Wuthering Heights is like
Yeah.
old, kind of ruined because of the weather. Constantly,
Hmm.
the weather's always described as rougher and more intense at Wuthering Heights than it is at the Grange.
And they're like 4 miles apart, I want to say.
Yeah, like
So
enough
like
that
you
it's a
have to want to
distance.
go from one place to another. It's not like they're
Yeah,
like really like literal neighbors right next to each other.
yeah. Yeah. So they're spying on the Lintons because there's also two kids at the Lintons. So they're spying and Kathy gets bit by their little dog.
Hmm.
Um which I think it's dogs like keep showing up in such interesting ways throughout this novel. And
Yeah.
like this is the second time and it's a sillier time because it doesn't do as much actual damage as, the hunting dogs earlier that were attacking Lockwood would have done.
Hmm.
Um, so they get caught because of this dog, and the Lintons have Kathy stay with them to like heal, but also she ends up getting sick because of the long walk, and she stays with them for weeks. But the two kids, the Linton kids, make fun of Heathcliff immediately,
Hmm.
like just shout a bunch of like racist stuff at him, and be like, "Be gone! You cannot come here," you
Right.
know. And so he has to go back to Wuthering Heights by himself while Kathy stays there for weeks. Catherine eventually returns. And when she's returned, she's a refined lady. Like
Hmm.
she knows how to say her P's and Q's and, dresses appropriately and
Her
doesn't.
hair is nicely curled now.
Yes, yes. There's a lot of hair description in this book.
Hmm.
A
Yeah.
lot of hair description. And like hair color, I get because there's a lot of color symbolism throughout the book. But the hair, like, how, which is like, it makes sense. It's the author's a woman. She understands how you wear your hair is
Hmm.
so different and the process is different. Like, if you have more help, you can do fancier, nicer things to your hair versus
Right.
just one person. So, like, there's the classism part of that too,
Hmm.
which is all over this novel. But I thought the hair stuff always like I was like, oh, I guess she has curled hair today. Okay, cool. Thanks for letting me know, Emily. All right. While Catherine's been there, Heathcliff has spent an extra amount of time outside of Wuthering Heights to avoid um to avoid I think Hindley's back at this time.
Yes, because he
Yeah.
returns with his wife.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then have they had Harriton at this point?
Not yet, but just
Okay.
about. Yeah. Catherine comes back, and Catherine's now like trying to get Edgar Linton to uh become her suitor and to like come over, and she wants to impress him. And when Edgar
Hmm.
comes over, he makes fun of Heathcliff's face, and Heathcliff throws applesauce on him.
Yes, the applesauce incident.
And he vows revenge on Edgar. And this is the first like at least announcements of revenge. Like we as we are reading, I understood Heathcliff is gonna try and kill Hindley eventually. Like they're just physically always fighting. Like Hindley's
Hmm.
abusive. Hindley's eventually, I don't know if it happens quite yet, but eventually forces him to be, a servant, and he no longer is a part of the family like he was for most of his childhood.
Hmm.
And so it's like, yes, Hindley and Heathcliff will eventually battle each other. I understood that. But then when he's like, I'm gonna get revenge on Edgar, it like at first seems so out of place, but that's because when I was reading this, at this point at least, it seemed very like one-sided as far as their like Catherine Heathcliff relationship at this point.
Hmm.
Like I can see that Heathcliff's infatuated with Catherine, and because she's the only nice person in his life, right?
Yeah.
But I have yet to see the like romantic feelings or whatever these feelings they have for each other, whatever that is called, the obsession. I have yet to see it from Catherine, so it did surprise me a bit here.
Hmm. Is it shortly after this that we have the scene where Heathcliff overhears Catherine talking about how she feels about him?
Yeah. Yeah, because he hasn't left yet.
Yes, but I think it's shortly after the really disastrous. I think it's isn't it Christmas that this is all happening? Like the
It's
Lintons come over, they
mhm.
have a big celebration, and then it ends up ending terribly because Heathcliff throws the applesauce, and the rivalry between him and Edgar
Mhm.
is becoming more established. And Edgar's starting
Mhm.
to visit a lot, right? Like, and
Edgar's
Heathcliff
visiting a
is
lot. Yeah.
he's keeping score. He's like, you, Catherine, you spend this many evenings with Edgar, and you only
Yes.
spend this many evenings with me.
Hmm.
So she's very much being kind of pulled in two directions by these two
Yeah.
men.
Yeah, because the applesauce situation happens. Henley's wife Frances has their son Hareton, but then Frances ends up dying shortly,
Hmm.
and this just spins Henley even more tyrannical. Like he's like in his grief he becomes more and more abusive.
Hmm.
But this is like all that happens, and then Edgar is still coming over to Wuthering Heights, and
For some
this is
reason, he
where
keeps coming back.
yeah, because apparently Catherine's that gorgeous. Or whatever. But she ends up having like a double character, and the book describes her as having that double character where she is
Hmm.
the like refined woman, lady, respectable towards Edgar, and then her truer, earlier described self towards Heathcliff.
Hmm.
So they have this double, like, not personality, but double persona that she has.
Hmm.
Then there's the whole fight when Catherine ends up pinching Nellie and slapping Edgar,
Yes.
which I don't remember what starts that on. That's on chapter 8. What starts that? Why does she is it because Nellie like says stuff about her?
Oh, it's when Catherine and Heathcliff. It's when when he confronts her about spending more time with Edgar than with him. I think that Nellie just gets kind of caught in the crosshairs of all of
Mm,
this. Um, yeah, she's trying to clean, I think. And
yeah.
then she says, "I hate you to be fidgeting in my presence."
Mhm.
And then Nellie tries to apologize. Um, and then she, supposing Edgar could not see her, snatched the cloth from my hand and pinched me with a prolonged wrench very spitefully on the arm. So she just, I guess, kind of loses her composure
Mhm.
with Nellie. She stamped her foot. She commands Nellie to leave. And then she slaps Edgar, I think.
Yeah. Well, because like then Harriton gets involved, because she ends up shaking the little toddler at this point,
Yes.
and Edgar stops her from shaking the baby, and that's why
Yes.
she slaps him. But this
That's
is
what
like
it
the
is.
first, yeah, this is the first time we're seeing like, I mean, they're not adults at this point. They're still like 13, 14 at this
Yeah, they're like
point.
teenagers.
Yeah, but she's not a kid anymore, like a little kid. But this is the first time
Hmm.
like expressing this like anger, especially in front of Edgar, which is shocking. So it quickly breaks down that like double persona she has, and like the kind of two kind of combine. Like she has learned how to be like a pristine woman, but she still has this wily physicality to her, and this
Hmm.
anger, and this like
Yeah.
off the hinges at any moment situation that they have. And Edgar, leaves. And also, this is when Hindley is also like drinking a ton here because he's grieving and also he's just disturbed as a person.
Yeah.
And
And he's
has a
neglecting
lot
his
of,
son.
yeah, he's neglecting his son. But this is where he's like, also, Nellie, I have this gun and I'm gonna kill someone one day. And Nellie's like,
Hmm.
and she's like, in her retelling to Lockwood, she goes, and I took the gun and I hid it. And
Hmm.
it's like, so they have, what they call that? What's it called? I always want to say Schrodinger's cat. That's not that. Where they have, it's like, oh, in Act 1, the gun is in the drawer, and by Act 3, the gun is out. What is
Oh,
that
is it
called?
also on the tip of my tongue as well? Oh, it's
Anyways,
gone.
that, and so when she's like, and I purposely, she tells us, and I hid the gun, and I'm like, is Nellie gonna later in this book shoot Heathcliff? Is that how this ends? Because like in my head, I was like, I don't know how he dies. Spoiler alert,
Hmm.
Heathcliff dies. A lot of other people die too. But like, I was like, is this how it ends? Does Nellie end up killing him? And we'll see if
Hmm.
my thoughts from days ago were correct. They weren't. But I just thought it made me like laugh a little bit. I was like, interesting. This is not where I was thought this is gonna go, you know.
Yeah, well, like Nellie will keep you guessing. Like she's a really interesting narrator because she's
Yes.
not just saying what happened. She's kind of we're getting like her, how her feelings, her thoughts, her perceptions. Like she's
Hmm.
interrupting her narration constantly to like tell, kind of interpret for Lockwood or give her
Yeah.
her kind of take on whatever's going on at this point in the
Especially
story.
for for Heathcliff in the beginning, she's like, I hate that man. But when he was young, I felt bad for him, but I wasn't nice to him because she's not nice to Heathcliff as a kid or Kathy,
Mm-mm,
specifically not Kathy. She's very misogynistic towards Kathy. And like, that's where a lot of their like beef between them when they're young, that
mm-hmm,
they move on past that as they grow up because Kathy ends up being in a higher place in the class role and, more privileged than Nellie is eventually. But
mm-hmm,
um when they're young, they have a like Nellie's opinions of Kathy are very like she's not as a woman should be. But then with Heathcliff, she's like, I hate him now. But when he was young, I felt bad. And this part, I kind of liked him at this part. And then I didn't like him. And then I did like him. And then it's like, it's very obviously much more poetic than that. But that's kind of
yeah.
like the vibe of Nellie's like opinions of these characters, which is really interesting because it's like, as a novel, as readers, are we supposed to like believe that she's truthful? We could talk about that as we go. Like,
Yeah.
is she reliable? Are we supposed to be swayed by her opinions? Are we supposed to
Mhm.
like dissect her opinions? Like, I don't know. It's just very interesting, the Nelly of it all.
Yeah. It is interesting. And I know that there have people have argued that she is an unreliable narrator, and
Hmm.
that you can, if you do look at her account with suspicion, like that leaves a lot of questions about what the
Hmm.
family history really is.
Yeah.
Um, and where there are gaps. And of course, like even if she is telling the truth, there's still a lot that we don't know about what
Hmm.
happens with certain characters because it's only things
Yeah.
that she happens to witness.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And especially because she ends up being like the nursemaid to most of the children that come through
Hmm.
the novel. So,
Yeah.
and it's not just like, oh, I helped out their moms. It's like, no, like for example, Hareton, his mom died right after childbirth. So essentially, Nellie is Hareton's mother for the first
Yeah.
2 to 3 years of his life, you know, or a little bit longer than that, honestly. And so it's just very interesting to see how those, like, we don't get too much insight on that besides like a comment on like, oh, as a baby, he was so sweet, or like that. Like, it's very like off to the side. And I'm like, okay, how much of these, like, 'cause she's not, I wouldn't argue that Nellie's the villain, but she is a victim of all this because she's like been given charge of these children and then she gets those children ripped away from her like
Hmm.
willy-nilly, not willy-nilly. Haha.
Yeah.
Um, in chapter 9, this is when Henley is super drunk and almost kills Hareton because he holds him over the stairs and drops him, but Heathcliff saves Hareton at the
Hmm.
last minute, but it's because Henley is so drunk. Um, and this is also where the same chapter where Catherine is talking to Nellie and like, what do I do? My heart isn't to Edgar has proposed to her, but she talks about her love of Heathcliff here. And this is where it's like, okay, it's not just like they're besties, it's something more, something other, you know?
Hmm.
And we get a lot of the famous lines in this conversation too.
Yes, I can read just a little bit of it, the overheard
Mhm.
conversation. Catherine's trying to explain to Nellie what she feels because she's basically trying to get Nellie's thoughts on like, I think Edgar's asked me to marry him and I think I'm going to say yes. But then she ends up not talking about how she feels about Edgar so much. She ends up talking
Mhm.
about how she feels about Heathcliff. She says, I've no more business to marry Edgar Linton than I have to be in heaven. And if the wicked man in there had not brought Heathcliff so low, I shouldn't have thought of it. It would degrade me to marry Heathcliff now, so he shall never know how I love him. And that not because he's handsome, Nellie, but because he's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. And Linton's is as different as a moonbeam from lightning or frost from fire.
The line, whatever souls are made of, his or mine are the same. That line I knew before reading this book. And so
Hmm.
I knew this wasn't like a romance, like they don't, there's no happily ever after for them. It's not that kind of romance. I knew there was something romantic between them, but I didn't
Hmm.
understand what it really was. And so reading this for the first time, this also shocked me here because she's, the love triangle of it all. One, I didn't realize how like entangled the love triangle would eventually become. Because
Yes.
whoa. Here we have Catherine like proclaiming her love for Heathcliff, but also being like, he's so much like me that I would never be able to marry him because I don't want to marry myself. Essentially, like there's so much self-hate within that like proclamation that was very
Hmm.
interesting to me. And then it plays really into the themes of heaven and hell, whereas
Hmm.
she's saying life with Linton will essentially be heaven, whereas no, with Heathcliff, it would be closer to hell in that, with the Wuthering Heights versus the Grange of it all. And it's so interesting to me, her because we don't get many proclamations from Catherine. Like this is the majority of it here. And
Hmm.
it just surprises me so much.
We get more of her kind of interiority, and Catherine's a character that, for reasons we'll talk about in a bit when we get to that part in the story, we don't get a lot of her interiority as a character,
Hmm.
compared to others. We never meet them in like Lockwood's frame narrative. We don't meet her then, and we really only hear about her from Nellie. And
Hmm.
from, I guess, Lockwood's ghostly encounter at the very beginning of the book. But
Hmm.
here we're really getting a very kind of intimate look
Hmm.
into her heart and into her mind. And I think for that reason, this is really striking and, does it is surprising because of
Yeah.
that look that we're getting into her thoughts.
The love is so intense, but like it's so intense it becomes the obsession because
Hmm.
like later on in this conversation she goes on the whole bit where she's like my great thought in living is himself, Heathcliff. If all else shall perish and he remained, I should continue to be, and if all else remained and he were annihilated, the universe would turn into a mighty stranger. And
Hmm.
then she says, my love for Linton is like the foliage in the woods. Time will change it. My love for Heathcliff resembles the eternal rocks beneath, a source of little very visible delight, but necessary. I am Heathcliff. He always, always is on my mind. Not as a pleasure any more than I am a pleasure to myself, but as my own being. Is this love? And I want to say no. I
Hmm.
don't like it's so weird. I don't know. I don't think it's love. I don't know. Is it love?
I I don't I don't think so. I think that the affect of it is very non-romantic. If it is love, it is not affection. It is
Yes.
not even really desire. It's more like it's just necessity. Like
Mm-hmm.
she requires his presence.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that very presence that she requires is so intense that she can't imagine it always being, you know, always being around and always feeling like its intensity is right there. And maybe that's one of the reasons why she does choose Edgar.
Yeah.
Um, she says a little bit later, my love for Linton is like the foliage in the woods. Time will change it. I'm well aware as winter changes the trees. My love for Heathcliff resembles the eternal rocks beneath, a source of little visible delight, but necessary. I feel like that's also really telling. Like she feels like she
Mm-hmm.
needs it, but it's not something that is, really, contributing to her happiness.
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe that's kind of what this is. It's about, kind of a need rather than a want.
When I was reading this, I'm just like, I'm not convinced that Catherine loves Heathcliff. I think you're right. I think it is uh like and she needs him to be consistently there. Uh but it's not love, it's not affection, it's not desire. Whereas I think, and we'll get there eventually, I do think it's not the same for Heathcliff. Um,
Hmm.
but like here it's like, it's beautiful writing and it makes me question a lot of stuff, but it's not like romantic in the lowercase way. It's very
Yeah.
romantic in capitalized way, you know.
Yes.
But, so reading this and like I knew this wasn't a romance story, but reading this I was like, oh, this again, it surprised me because I was like, this is not as romantic as I thought it was going to be. Like I
Hmm.
thought it is a very tragic story in general, but I thought it was gonna be like very more like very romantic than very tragic. It kind of just is tragic.
Yes. And tumultuous. I feel like that's the
Yes.
word. Like the
Yes.
atmosphere, the relationships, it's just so tumultuous.
Yes.
And the other thing about this scene is that Heathcliff overhears. This is
Hmm.
what I mentioned a while back. I had my timeline a little off, but this is a really essential
Hmm.
moment too, because Heathcliff comes in when Catherine is telling Nellie that it would degrade her to marry him. He doesn't hear any of the stuff about like, you know, he's more myself than I am. What of our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. He
Hmm.
just hears that and then he leaves. And
Yes.
this is what turns into Heathcliff permanently leaving, well, not permanently, but for a while leaving the Heights
Yeah.
entirely.
He leaves
He,
for 3 years
yes.
and no one knows where he went.
Hmm.
He
And
just
it's never
goes.
explained where he went.
Hmm. Yeah. And at this point, Catherine ends up marrying Edgar, and Nellie is forced to go to Thrushcross Grove with Catherine as her maid, and this is when
Hmm.
she gets ripped away from Hareton, her essentially her
Yes.
first baby. Well, not literally her baby, but the first child she's raising. Um,
Right.
and then we skip 6 months later, after Kathy and Edgar have been married, 3 years and 6 months. So 3 years have passed. They have moved and been
Hmm.
married for 6 months. And soon a refined and now rich, mysteriously rich Heathcliff returns.
Hmm.
Um, and
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. I realized we probably should have established that their father died a long time ago.
Oh, yes, that's important. Yes. Yeah, Ernest
So
Shop has died.
yeah, so he dies very early when they're
hmm
still like adolescents.
hmm
And so Hindley is now the man of the house, but
hmm
he's also he suffers from alcoholism. He's,
hmm
has mental health issues after the death of his
hmm
wife. He's not able to adequately take care of his son. There's a very kind of quirky, shall we say, servant named Joseph who kind of
hmm
takes care of the operations of the Heights, but it's
I
basically
forgot about
just them
Joseph.
and Harriton. I know Joseph, he speaks in Yorkshire dialect. Does your book
Yes.
have footnotes for
It
the
does not have footnotes. It just has like, well, it has like very minimal footnotes, but it helps with some of Joseph's
it
dialogue.
does?
I'm not
Okay,
gonna
I
lie,
really
I kind of
struggle
just
with
like,
that.
I just like would like try to read it, and as soon as I couldn't read through the Yorkshire dialect. I just like went to where he stopped reading and then put it together with context clues. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm sorry, guy, my guy. He's
Yeah, he's
also
very
really
mean.
religious.
He's very religious.
hmm Yeah,
Um, but anyway, yeah, at the Heights at this point, it's just Hindley, Little Harriton, and Joseph,
Joseph.
right? There's
Yes.
nobody else at this point. And then
hmm
Catherine and Edgar are now the lord and lady, as it were, of the Grange.
hmm Yeah, and Nellie's living with them.
And Edgar has a
And
sister
Edgar's
too.
sister, Isabella. I
Hmm.
forgot. How dare I forget? Um, so Heathcliff has returned, 3 plus years, refined, rich, mysterious,
Yes.
and he is bent on revenge, specifically for Hindley. When he goes and he reunites with Kathy, that kind of inspires him to have even a more longer scheme of revenge to also enact on the Lintons, as it were. Um,
Hmm.
and he he's able to live because Henley is so deep into his alcoholism and just like
And gambling.
anger, gambling, exactly. Heathcliff, because he has money, is able to live at Wuthering Heights. It's because he's essentially like enabling all this gambling. And so Henley's like, I hate you, but I guess you could hang out here, like,
Hmm.
if you can help me with more gambling. Um, we meet more of Isabella kind of comes into the picture a bit more here. She's a little bit younger than Edgar and Kathy, and she becomes obsessed with Heathcliff. Even though Catherine has told her not to, Edgar's told her not to, Nellie's told her not to, and even Heathcliff's like not denying any of the bad things about
No.
himself. She's still so infatuated with him.
Hmm.
And I found that super interesting because, like, it's very obvious that Heathcliff's like, I guess I'll court you because it's gonna make your brother pissed off, and that's my goal in life right now is to make your brother miserable.
Hmm.
But just so you know, I'm not a good dude. And like at this point, I also found it interesting. I was like, what makes Heathcliff at this point a bad guy? Is it just
Mm.
because he's not white and rich? I mean, now he's rich, but like he hasn't been at this point, like, yes, he has fought with Hindley, but that is understandable in my point of view. If you're getting attacked,
Hmm.
defend yourself. But like, he hasn't like abused anyone at this point that we know of. Like, at this point, he's still kind of like an underdog. And it's just very interesting to me that they're all like, don't mess with Heathcliff, you know?
Hmm.
And like, Kathy, I understand why Catherine doesn't want him to, because she still has this like obsession and like ownership almost over him. So like
Hmm.
that makes sense to me. But in Edgar, I can understand because of the whole love triangle that there kind of was for a little bit. But
Yeah.
like, why does everyone else why is he so hated at this moment?
Yeah. And like who else would she end up with? That's the other thing. It's like they
Hmm.
are living in such a rural area. The closest town is Gimmerton, which I believe is a very small town and not a place
Hmm.
that would have other like wealthy enough families to marry anyone.
Hmm.
So like they don't really have any other option than to couple up with the houses that are there, which of course is also bound to become incestuous at a certain point, which
Yep.
it does.
Yeah. Yes.
But that also, it's like, who else is there to pair her off with unless you send her away?
Hmm.
Um, maybe it's just his like foundling status, like everyone knows that he's,
Yeah.
or maybe suspects that he's a bastard of
Hmm.
Mr. Earnshaw's, or that otherwise he's just
Hmm.
not fit
Yeah.
to be paired with a young lady like Isabella.
Hmm. Yeah. And then it just, because, as I was reading, I'm like, he hasn't at this point done any horrible things. It's like, okay, so this is just because he's not white and not rich, or not rich in the like acceptable ways. Because no one knows, how did he get these riches? They're just like assuming he's going out and he's getting them from gambling or other
Mhm.
nefarious means out in London or wherever he went to. Who knows? Obviously, these themes have been throughout the book, but they really start heating up here because he, to me at least, are becoming very evident here, because he just shows up and everyone's like, "How dare you?" And he's like, "I'm just a guy, man. I'm coming back to the place I know, which is this place that is in ruins, and I would guess I'm gonna try and buy it. He's addicted to gambling. I'll give him money so I can buy the house and take over and, have revenge on him," which I'm like, revenge isn't good, but Hindley also was abusive. So,
Yeah.
Isabella and Heathcliff begin to court. Catherine sees them embracing, or sorry, Nellie sees them embracing, and yeah, Nellie sees them embracing and tells Catherine, and this is where Catherine confronts Heathcliff. Um, and uh, he starts telling her of his intentions of revenge on the Lintons. Because Heathcliff's like, "I'm not your husband, and you needn't be jealous of me." And Catherine says, "I'm not jealous of you. I'm jealous for you. If you like Isabella, you shall marry her. But do you like her? Tell the truth, Heathcliff."
Hmm.
And so it's like her jealousy is, beginning to get more evident.
Hmm. Heathcliff says, "You are welcome to Catherine. You are welcome to torture me to death for your amusement. Only allow me to amuse myself a little in the same style." So it's this whole like masochistic, like they're mutually torturing each other. Of course, he's
Yeah.
tortured by the fact that she's with Edgar. She also is unhappy that he's with Isabella. They're both miserable with this reality, and she's comfortable with Edgar, but there's no great passion. There's
Hmm.
no, he's not necessary to her in the way that Heathcliff is. So
Yeah.
there's that, sense of dissatisfaction as well.
Yeah. After this like argument, Edgar comes and like tries to banish Heathcliff away from the
Hmm.
Grange, and he punches Heathcliff. And this sparks Catherine into a rage and like a mental spiral of
Yes.
like downfall, because Heathcliff's been forced away. Like, he just came back and now he's being forced away by her
Hmm.
husband. Um, and she essentially becomes delirious.
Yeah. Yeah, she says, "If I cannot keep Heathcliff for my friend, if Edgar will be mean and jealous, I'll try to break their hearts by breaking my own." And there's this
Hmm.
whole kind of weird ambiguity where it's like she's kind of almost like strategically like trying to make herself quote unquote insane. But
Hmm.
then as this continues, it becomes clear that whatever like her intentions were, she is certainly like experiencing some kind of mental health crisis. It's not just
Yes.
performative or anything like that. Even if
Yeah.
there is kind of an intention on her part to kind of make them both pay for what they've done to her and the situation she's in, it does end up being something that she becomes a victim of.
Yes. There's a lot of talk of her wanting freedom from that house. So, like, whereas Wuthering Heights is constantly referred to as like hell or jail, or that people are trapped there. Here, as she's going through this like delirium of sorts, she starts talking about how she needs the freedom and she's yearning for like going out into the wilderness at this point. And she also talks a lot how by next spring she'll be dead. Like, she's just
Hmm.
like, this
Yep.
is it. And at the end of this chapter, Isabella ends up eloping with Heathcliff, and
Hmm.
Edgar disowns Isabella for doing that.
Yes.
But it's like also this elopement came like miles away because what doesn't encourage a teenage girl to do the opposite than someone forbidding them against their love. So like there's this forbiddable like forbidden man. Oh no, I
Hmm.
can't be in love with him. I can fix him. Isabella's very much I can fix him at the beginning of here
Yeah.
and eloping. And like yikes. Poor Isabella.
Poor innocent
Um
Isabella.
yeah. But as Catherine slowly recovers, we also discover that she's pregnant.
Hmm.
And from what everyone suspects is Edgar's child, which
Hmm.
is from, and here's my question, because like, is it really Edgar's child? Because I feel like we're hearing it through Nellie's perspective. Like, yes, Nellie's happens to be in a lot of these rooms because of, social decorum, but also she's the housekeeper, etc. Um, I'm not convinced that Catherine and Heathcliff, I don't know. I feel like they probably saw each other beyond just that one interaction because it's almost like only one or two interactions when he comes back from the 3-year
Hmm.
departure. And I don't know, like that extreme of a reaction based on just a conversation in the parlor room is a lot,
Mm.
you know?
Oh,
I
like
don't,
Edgar suspects that they have had a sexual
yeah,
relationship.
yeah. So I'm not sure. I'm not like convinced it's Edgar's child. I'm not convinced it's Heathcliff's. I'm just like I think there's
Hmm.
more ambiguity there than is explored on the text.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I've always my opinion, I think that it is Edgar's
Hmm.
child. When we get the description of this child, who very confusingly
That's
is also
true.
named Catherine,
Yes.
she's described as having physical traits of both parents. So in some ways
Hmm.
she looks like Catherine, but she has the light coloring because of course we have the light dark
Hmm.
binary with Heathcliff and Edgar. Edgar's very like, blonde hair, blue eyes, light skin,
Hmm.
all those things.
Hmm.
And the daughter that they have ends up growing up to look much like Edgar, but she has Catherine's dark eyes. Um, that could be, just, her, genetic expression can be really
Yeah.
unpredictable. And it could be Nellie, like maybe even wanting to like, you know, not wanting to believe that that's a
Hmm.
possibility. I suppose we could leave that open as a possibility that people are just like maybe there is that possibility, but people just don't want to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. I think the kind of final scene we have with Heathcliff and Catherine before she gives birth to the baby,
Hmm.
where he holds her and it's like a very
Yeah.
like intense physical moment, that reads to me as like they've not had this kind of like physical access to each other in a very long time, which makes
Hmm.
me think that they maybe didn't like have sex before that, and that this is like the closest that they get to like
Yeah.
being one where they're like, maybe we can even find the passage, but there's a scene where like Heathcliff and Catherine embrace, and it's like
Yeah.
the most like intense, like
Hmm.
holding each other super tightly, like they're like almost kind of feral, like
Yeah.
attachment to each other. And
Yeah.
that reads to me as like a fulfillment of a kind of physical connection that they haven't been able to have, if not ever, at least not for a long time. But that's just
Hmm.
my opinion. I
Yeah.
definitely think there's some ambiguity in the text.
No, I think with that spoiler, Catherine dies with her death scene as like after she gives birth. I think that is like, you know, in Catherine and Heathcliff's relationship, that is like it is the climactic moment. It is the big payoff of like the will they, won't they tension, which is a weird way to say it because I'm not like will they, won't they? It's like, you know, do they actually have this weird strong and infatuous relationship. Yes, they do. There's the death scene moment. Um, and
Hmm.
I think there is that ambiguity, but I think you're right. It is this the wild moment. I'm trying to find the passage.
I think I found it. I think it's in chapter 15.
15.
And Edgar's away, and Heathcliff
Hmm.
manages to kind of sneak into. Does Nellie help him
Nellie helps
see
him. Yeah.
her? Yeah, Nellie
Yeah.
helps Heathcliff see Catherine, and they have this whole very intense scene together. Um, and Catherine says, Heathcliff, dear, you should not be sullen now. Do come to me, Heathcliff. In her eagerness, she rose and supported herself on the arm of the chair. At that earnest appeal, he turned to her, looking absolutely desperate. His eyes wide and wet at last flashed fiercely on her. His breast heaved convulsively. An instant they held asunder, and then how they met I hardly saw, but Catherine made a spring, and he caught her, and they were locked in an embrace from which I thought my mistress would never be released alive. In fact, to my eyes, she seemed directly insensible. He flung himself into the nearest seat, and on my approaching hurriedly to ascertain if she had fainted, he gnashed at me and foamed like a mad dog and gathered her to
Hmm.
him with greedy jealousy. I did not feel as if I were in the company of a creature of my own species. It appeared that he would not understand, though I spoke to him, so I stood off and held my tongue in great perplexity. So you have another like racialized moment where Nellie is
Hmm.
like seeing Heathcliff as this like not quite human
Hmm.
creature in the scene.
Hmm.
And it's such an intimate moment, but you have Nellie relating it, which is such a weird experience as a
Yes.
reader. Like it seems like a moment of like profound connection between Heathcliff and Catherine, but we're getting it mediated through this
Hmm.
housekeeper. Did you have that
Hmm.
experience reading this scene as well?
Yes. Like her just sitting there, like this girl that she grew up with is dying. She now is gonna have another child to take care of that will
Hmm.
not have a mom. Like, and then there's this like relationship between Heathcliff and Catherine and Nellie. Like, I don't know. Nellie, it's like I go between like feeling so bad for her in these situations because she is, she is a housemaid. Like she has so much oppression against her in that position. Like she's doesn't have money, she doesn't have access,
Hmm.
she doesn't have autonomy, yet she's not kind. She
No.
is not patient. You can tell like this kind of like obviously we see a lot of throughout the book, a lot of oppression and how that affects the characters. Like we see how it affects Heathcliff as he deals with racism and classism throughout the whole novel. We see it how it affects Catherine, like the misogyny in general, and
Hmm.
motherhood in general, how it's treated in this novel. But like, and that's so like very visible on the page, but then you just get these little glimpses of Nellie because it's her telling the story. Then I'm like,
Hmm.
Nellie, girl, what's really going on? What is like either with you or in this scene, you know? Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and they, the whole foam like a mad dog. Again, the dog thing comes back here, and like there's a
Yeah,
part
yeah.
around this part where when after Heathcliff comes back with Hareton, he like starts um kind of treating he's convincing Hareton to like him more than his dad as like
Hmm.
part of uh the long game revenge plan he has. But he also like starts treating Hareton later in the book like a dog, like
Yeah.
go fetch this, go do like very, very. So it just, and I think he even describes him later on as a dog. But
Yeah.
so
Very
seeing it here,
dehumanizing.
yes, yes, very
Hmm.
dehumanizing. And so just very interesting that the dog thing keeps coming back. It keeps coming
Right.
back. Yeah.
And yeah, Heathcliff was, abused and tormented by Hindley, and now the roles are reversed, where Heathcliff is in the position of power over
Hmm.
Hindley's son later on in the book, which we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but spoiler alert,
Yeah.
Hindley also dies. Pretty much
Yeah.
everyone dies.
Hmm.
But at a certain point, it ends up just being Heathcliff and Hareton and Joseph,
Hmm.
the servant at the Heights. And so you have Hareton is completely under Heathcliff's subjection, and you have him treating him perhaps in many ways like how Henley treated Heathcliff earlier in the book.
Hmm.
But at this point, we have Catherine. She has her baby. We have
Hmm.
Catherine Jr., who's born.
Catherine Linton. The
Catherine
names
Linton.
and like the names have such purpose and I understand that, but
Hmm.
also as a reader, it is such a hassle. I'm like,
Yes, it
okay,
totally
what
is.
Catherine like you know.
Yes. Dear listeners, we will do our best to tell you which
Well,
Catherine this
it
is, which
does help
Linton this
that
is.
they do kill off one of the Catherines, so therefore there's only one Kathy left, you
Yes, we
know?
have a replacement
One
Catherine.
Kathy to rule them all. Um
And in the darkness bind them.
um but yeah, so as she's, dying in Heathcliff's arms, we just get like a very understandably dramatic exclamations from both of them. I don't know, it's a lot of like if I die, you die, or if you die, I will see you tomorrow. Like there's a lot of like I can't live without you sentiment.
Hmm.
And especially towards the end here, which makes sense because Catherine is dying. But like it's very extreme and it plays into that like the classic when like stereotypically teenage girls fall head over heels, they're like, I cannot live without him. It is very much that energy.
Yeah.
Again, not romantic somehow, but still that same amount of energy there. I don't know.
Yes.
This is
Intensity.
weird. Yeah. Well, no, I do think Heathcliff actually does love Catherine.
I agree, but it's different.
It is
It's
different.
different than what she feels for him. I agree.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Also, Heathcliff in chapter 16 curses Catherine in a weird way. I wrote, what does he say?
Yes, yeah. May she wake in torment. Where is she? Not there, not in heaven. Catherine Earnshaw, may you not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed
Hmm.
you. Haunt me then. The murdered
Yes.
do haunt their murderers, I believe. I know the ghosts have wandered the earth. Be with me always. Take any form. Drive me mad. Only do not leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you.
Hmm. Yeah. So in his like grief, he's like, if you're dead, you better haunt me. Like you can't leave
Hmm.
me. And it's so intense. And he also takes a cutting of her hair
Hmm.
and her locket, which, we talked in sensibility, the power of hair and
Yes.
lockets.
There's our
This one,
connection
right?
into
Yes.
sensibility.
There we go. But in a very, different context here.
And he tries to dig up her grave or her coffin.
Is that this fast
That might be a
already?
little later.
I think
I
that's
might
a
be
little
getting
later, but
ahead.
yeah. But that part, yeah, yeah. That shocked me. Well, I mean, it didn't, but it did. Anyways.
Very
Um,
gothic.
but Catherine dying, so Catherine dies and she dies in like page 120 something of my edition, not even halfway through the book. And that
Yep.
shocked me reading
Hmm.
this. That's one of the big shocks because like I knew she died eventually. And but I didn't realize how much of the story happens after Catherine dies.
Yeah.
Like most of it does.
Yeah.
Like I just from like pop culture and movies and people loving Heathcliff and Kathy together, and also like songs like the Kate Bush song, I just thought Catherine was much more of a character than she is. I mean, obviously she's a very like intense, iconic character, but she's
Hmm.
only there for half the story. And that's just so surprising to me still.
Yes. And
Yeah.
like, not to get, I know we're not talking about the films, but most of the films of
Hmm.
Wuthering Heights only tell the first half of the story
Yeah.
because Catherine is such a like, she's really what like I think drives so much of the story, and her and Heathcliff's
Hmm.
intense bond, whatever we want to call
Hmm.
it, not quite love bond,
Yeah.
beyond love bond. That when like she dies, that the it feels kind of like falling action for much, or some people would might argue that like the rest of the book, doesn't quite achieve that like fever pitch of intensity. It feels kind of like
Hmm.
falling action in comparison to the
Hmm.
intensity that we've been talking about for the first half.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I agree with to that with some in some ways, but I do think the second half does have some really intense moments
It
as we
does.
get to it, but it is kind
Yeah.
of like two stories almost.
Hmm.
And depending on what emphasis you're putting on, there's either like if you're putting on the emphasis on the second half of the book, then the first half is like, oh, it's a prequel. But if you're looking at the first half intensely, then the rest of it's like, oh, this is the sequel.
Yeah.
Like in the very dismissive ways people talk about
Hmm.
prequels and sequels. So like
Yeah,
you
it's
could look
true.
at it that way, which I know a lot of media does. And we'll definitely talk about that next week.
Oh, yeah.
Just based on what I know about the movie that's coming out. So in the next bit, Hindley is going mad because his sister just died, and he, of course, blames Heathcliff. He and Heathcliff get in a huge fight because he tries to kill Heathcliff, but Heathcliff fights back.
And
Is
Isabella's
yes,
miserable. She's living at the
she's
Heights. We get a
yes,
few, I feel like I always forget about poor Isabella.
I
We hear
know.
a little bit about her because she sends Nellie messages.
Letters.
She's not
Yeah.
allowed to leave the Heights, but she she's like, please come help me. Like I'm miserable
Hmm.
living in this infernal house. And,
Hmm.
Heathcliff treats me terribly. Joseph treats me terribly. Harriton
Hmm.
treats me terribly. Like she's having an absolutely miserable time.
Yeah.
And Edgar has basically cut ties with her. He doesn't,
Yeah.
he's like, she made her choice. She chose
Yeah.
Heathcliff. We're done.
Yeah. Uh, and during that big fight between Hindley and Heathcliff, Isabella is she's injured, but she's also able to escape Wuthering Heights.
Yes.
So she's able to go to London, and that she ends up having a son who she names Lyndon. So we have Lyndon Heathcliff, which is the last names of both the families. And like again, I understand
Yes.
the symbolism, but come on, Emily.
It's a lot. But
It's a lot.
we now have our whole younger generation. So we
Yes.
have Hareton Earnshaw,
Hmm.
who's of course Hindley's son, who has been growing up at the Heights. He's grown up without any class training. So he's kind of, he's illiterate. He's not well spoken, he doesn't have
Hmm.
any of those markers of class that his like heritage as an Earnshaw,
Hmm.
should quote unquote give him. We have Catherine Linton, who
Hmm.
is Kathy's daughter, and she's living with Edgar at the Grange. And then
Hmm.
we have Linton Heathcliff, who is Heathcliff and Isabella's son, and he
Yeah.
is living with Isabella away from all of this at this
Hmm.
point.
Yeah, and we have a time jump. It's been 12 years after all those events.
Hmm.
And we meet and we get a lot of information about Catherine Linton. And she, um, unlike her mom, she is much milder. She's still headstrong, but she's much milder and she has a kinder side and she is
Hmm.
more, I guess, well trained than her mom was because of the Lintons having more money and more class status.
Yeah.
Um,
And she's really close with her father. They're
mhm.
very enmeshed. They've
Yes.
kind of trauma bonded a little bit because of course he's devastated that his wife died. And so
Yeah.
Catherine is all that he has left. So unlike,
Hmm.
Hindley could have gone that direction with Harriton and really, after his wife died earlier, could have like embraced Harriton and really like kind of had a close bond with him because of their, they both
Hmm.
lost Frances, his wife and Harriton's mother.
Hmm.
But instead, he went a different direction, whereas Edgar leans into his relationship with his child. So he and Catherine
Yeah.
are really close.
This whole like second generation is essentially the same age as the first generation was when the book started or the story started. They're all about the younger ones are like 12, about 12, and then
Hmm.
Harriton's probably like 15 or 16.
Yeah.
And this whole time, Catherine has not been allowed to go to Wuthering Heights or walk even enough through the land to be able to see that. And so she'll
Yeah.
make comments and be like, "What is that glow on the other side of the hill? The stars over there must be extra bright because they are bright
Hmm.
after night." It's like, no, that's a house. That's gas lamps, my guy. Come on. Stars and
Just like
gas lamps make
unbelievably
different color.
sheltered.
Yeah, she's very sheltered. She's quite spoiled, especially compared to the other of the second gen characters. But she eventually is able, she convinces Nellie to go out into the moors and she ends up going out, or maybe she goes by herself, I can't remember. But she goes out on an adventure and she ends up meeting Harriton in the moors.
Hmm.
And she comes back all excited and of course gets yelled at because she's not supposed to do that. But it's like the beginning of her adventuring, like symbolically, like her world's about to expand,
Yeah.
but also like she's learning more about, slowly but surely her family. Because in the next chapter, then we find out that Isabella has died. And so Isabella's sending Linton to go live with Edgar. He regrets shunning Isabella and like
Hmm.
is like, I'm happy to take Linton in. But
And keep
immediately,
Heathcliff from knowing.
yes, yes, but immediately Heathcliff finds out because it's a small town,
Hmm.
and and is like, I demand that I have my son. He is my literally my property, is what he says. And
Hmm.
it's like these 12 years have not been kind to Heathcliff because until this point, to me, in my perspective, at this point, the only bad thing he's done is try to keep Isabella in her house and then abuse her. I mean, that's not only a bad thing. Those are two horrible bad things. But
Hmm.
compared to the horrible bad things the other characters do, it's like
Yeah.
same par. Like we're on the
Yeah.
same
He hasn't
level.
tried to kill anyone.
No, like he's not trying to drop babies from the second story of a house. Like
Yeah.
Like, yes, he's a bad husband. Yes, he's an abusive husband,
Hmm.
but he's the same level of bad as the rest of them at this point, right? But then we
Yes.
kind of get hearsay from Nellie through her narration that these 12 years he's gotten even worse and more
Hmm.
devious. And we're just like, it's not a good thing that Linton is going to go to her or to his father's to live.
Yeah. Because the Heights have also become really like over time they've become less and less of a polite place.
Hmm.
Like it's like become really degraded. It's becoming more and more kind of a neglected haunted house where like there aren't as many servants. It doesn't have, the prestige that the Earnshaw family once had. It's a falling house, and it's falling even more under Heathcliff's proprietorship of it. Because of course
Hmm.
he was the mortgager of Hindley, got got the house because he basically cheated him out of all his money. And now it's really just kind of a crumbling shell of
Yes.
what it once was.
Yeah. We have a tinier time jump, and now Catherine Linton is 16, and she ends up running into Heathcliff and Hareton and the Moors when she's
Hmm.
out and about. And at first, Heathcliff is like very much like, "This is my land, get off my lawn" kind of energy. But then
Hmm.
he recognizes her because she looks like Edgar, but with Kathy's eyes.
Hmm.
and and so he recognizes her parents and like convinces her to go into Wuthering Heights, kind of like Big Bag Wolf style. Like,
Hmm.
come to my house, it's all fine, come on. And of course it's not good.
Hmm.
And Nellie's with her, so Nellie's also going, and Nellie's trying to get her not to go, but she's not listening to Nellie.
And right. And by this point, Catherine, she and Linton had like a brief they met each other really briefly when he was gonna live with them, but then very quickly he got summoned to live
Yes.
with Heathcliff.
Hmm.
But she's also encountered Heathcliff or Linton several times since. For a while they had like they were sending love letters to each other.
Hmm.
Um she's seen him a number of times. And he's very sickly, so he never
Yes.
wants to he's never up for hanging out for very long. Um,
Yeah.
they don't have a romantic bond, but because he's the only other person that she really has to
Hmm.
love aside from
Hmm.
Nellie and her father, she's, kind of drawn to wanting to help him. So Heathcliff at this point is exploiting that, and
Yes.
using that, like you said, to lure
Hmm.
them in.
Yeah. And what gets me is like the first time they go over, Kathy and Linton are reunited for the first time and they hit it off right away. Um, Heathcliff pulls Nellie aside and essentially tells her his big bad villain plan. He's like, "This is
Mhm.
my revenge. I'm gonna get these two married because then when my son, who is very sick and he's gonna die, then she won't get the Grange. I will because I will be
Mhm.
the man." And so they're gonna fall in love. And what this is what gets me is that so Nellie knows exactly what his plan is.
Mhm.
And she does nothing. Like she tries to stop her Catherine from going, but she
Mhm.
doesn't. And like she eventually tells or makes Catherine tell Edgar about the love notes and stuff eventually. But like she doesn't stop. And that gets me. I'm like, that's what I'm like, do I trust Nellie? Because Edgar has this knowledge and context of Heathcliff being a bad guy. So like why wouldn't she be more forceful in getting Edgar to not let Catherine go? And it's because Nellie ends up getting sick at the same time all of the sneaking around happens, so no one's there to watch
Yeah.
Catherine.
Mhm.
You know, that's what gets me with Nellie. I'm like, you knew. He literally Heathcliff told you beat by beat his plan, and yet
Yeah.
what you doing?
She does, to her credit, when she and Kathy get trapped at the Heights. She tries to stop it. She doesn't,
Mhm.
she's unequivocally trying to fight against their marriage, and she ends up getting basically locked into solitary
Yes.
confinement into one of the upstairs rooms.
Yeah.
So she does stand up
Eventually,
for
yeah.
Kathy at that point, but I agree that like earlier on,
Yeah.
like yeah, she was sick, but also like, she the call to take her there at all was a very, very dubious
Hmm.
choice on Nellie's
Yeah.
part.
I also found it so interesting that, not only is Heathcliff manipulating Kathy here to like get her to come to Wuthering Heights to like write love letters with Linton, but also he's manipulating obviously Linton because he manipulates literally what he's writing in those letters. But Linton is also so manipulative with his like sickliness.
Hmm.
Because he is very sick and he has been sick most of his life, but he's being abused by the household because of his sickliness. Like he's not being properly
Yeah.
cared for, and like that's, obviously he's like going through like the worst situation he could at this moment. But
Hmm.
when Kathy shows him kindness after like the second or so time she like nurses him and cares for him, he starts like putting that abuse on her. Like
Hmm.
then she becomes the target of it. And I just
Yeah.
found that, it just like a lot of this book, and we haven't talked about it too much, is about generational trauma. And
Yeah.
it's
And the
just
cycle of
so,
abuse.
yes. And it's just like, okay, we see Linton enter his version of this cycle of abuse. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I found that so interesting,
Yeah.
and horrible. But
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah. And poor Kathy too, because like she doesn't have a bad bone in her body.
No, I mean, she can be a little bit of a brat at times, but like
Yeah.
not on Linton's level. Linton becomes just,
Yeah.
and again, it is because of the way that he's being treated, but he
Yes.
becomes just so like uncaring toward her, so demanding, and
Hmm.
she's doing everything she can to try to help him, and just not getting anything in return except for him being really whiny and
Hmm.
discontented with everything she tries to do for him.
Yeah. When the final trap happens, we find out this is like a year ago from current events of Lockwood's time. Um, they get a Kathy gets a letter from Linton saying, "Please meet me halfway to the like moors. I need to see you." Like, like a love letter, like I can't live without you kind of thing. It's to get her to go out, and so Nellie and her go out there, but they end up not being actually halfway, so they walk further onto the Wuthering Heights land, and that's how they end up getting captured,
Right.
and
That's how the
forced.
trap happens.
Yeah, the trap happens. And I do like the chapter before it ends on kind of like a cliffhanger of sorts, because it's like Nellie says, and we should have known the big storm was right around the corner or something similar to
Hmm.
that effect. And I liked that because
Hmm.
it like kept me on my toes, but especially after, if we're talking about the first half of the book, it's so the emotions are so big and so wild. At this point, like the drama's going a lot, but it's just like simmering right now. Like nothing has
Hmm.
exploded, and this is when it like explodes. Like they get trapped. Nellie does get locked up for days, so much so that people thought that she just fell into a bog when she returns. They're
Yeah.
like, "We thought you fell into a bog."
Hmm. It's like at that point, I
It's
guess
like,
you just give up trying to
I
look. Like if they fell in the
guess.
bog, you're not going to find the body. So,
Yeah, Kathy and Linton are forced to marry, and
and at the
Kath,
same time, Edgar is really sick. That's the
yes,
other thing. So
yes.
he's been ill for a while, and
Hmm.
because of them being imprisoned at the Heights, um, I forget. Does Kathy? She does get to see him one more time before he dies, right?
Yes. Kathy is released only on promising that she will marry uh Linton as soon as her dad
Right.
dies. Or
Okay,
like
that's
right
what it
before or
is.
something like that. There's like a time limit or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Nellie's also free in time for her to go.
Hmm.
And like before Edgar's dying, Edgar's trying to get in touch with the lawyers because he wants to make sure Kathy gets the estates. But of course, Heathcliff has
Hmm.
already bought off the lawyers. And so it's just like,
Hmm.
and like at this point, like every single time Heathcliff's on the page, he's doing some awful thing. He's either being verbally abusive or physically abusive or using his money to manipulate the world around them to
Hmm.
essentially make Kathy and Linton and Edgar's life hell, all because of his
Hmm.
want of revenge. And like at this point, like as much as I like tried to give so much grace for Heathcliff in the first half, at this point I'm like, how do people still love Heathcliff as a character? Like, yes, he's a really interesting character to read. Like, yes, he's
Hmm.
dynamic. He's like his wants, his why he does things is so interesting to me. But people who treat him as like this romantic hero, I'm like, are we reading the same book?
Yeah. And like, it strikes me that that's probably one of the reasons why a lot of the adaptations cut off when they do, because often at that point, like Heathcliff has, at least his like list of like terrible things is a lot shorter. So maybe it's
Hmm.
more like believable that like, and the movie can
Hmm.
market it as like a romance or whatever. Again,
Yes.
not to get ahead of ourselves, but I wonder, we can talk, we can pick that back up when we talk about the film and
Yeah.
see if that's something that we see reflected.
Yeah.
But
when Heathcliff comes to take Kathy to Wuthering Heights, he also has this big moment and essentially like kind of like trauma dumps kind of on Nellie as he tends to do.
Yes,
This
he
is where we
does.
find out about the coffins and Heathcliff's
Mm.
whole thing. So he like one night is going out to where first gen Catherine Catherine Earnshaw was buried and or this is like or is a or is it a flashback of when she was getting buried or does he dig up her grave? Because I was confused about that.
I think he's he tries to dig up the grave,
Yeah.
but then doesn't.
Yeah. Because he like tries to dig up the grave and he wants to like physically be next to her and he tells the grave digger in the future, he's like, when I die, combine our two coffins so that our dust will intertwine together forever.
Hmm.
Like he's still just so obsessed.
Yes.
It's the only
He's
way I
never
can
let
describe
go.
it. Yeah. Him and the grave thing is that it comes up twice. This is the first time we hear about the grave thing. It comes up
Hmm.
later. Um, and yeah, so like when I was reading this, I was imagining him digging up her body, like literally digging up her body and literally crawling in there and like cradling her dead body.
Hmm.
I think it is much more figurative than literal, but I think maybe it is literal in his mind. Like this is the first kind of start of the the deterioration of Heathcliff and his sanity here. I think we do see it obviously way at the beginning of the ghosts things with Kathy, right? But I think here we kind of start to see
Hmm.
it a little bit more.
Hmm.
And I think I don't know if he like literally is digging up fully her coffin, but I do think he is imagining this and he is feeling that, you know?
Yeah. I agree. And of course, we have like the whole level of haunting that's going on as well. So,
Hmm.
like, what is real and what is his like tortured imaginings, I think is sometimes kind of blurred. And of course, we're getting this. Like, we have all these levels of mediation. We have Heathcliff telling Nellie, telling Lockwood, telling us. I feel like it's a very
Hmm.
humbling story to read when you realize just how many layers of mediation there are and like how much of this, like, could be Nellie embellishing, could be Lockwood embellishing, because he's the one that's supposedly writing this all
Yeah.
down and we're the ones reading it.
Hmm.
So it's interesting how that like destabilizes our understanding of what's actually happening.
Hmm. Um, does Linton die at this point? Probably.
He does. I'm trying to remember exactly when that happens in the timeline, but it's not long. That Linton is
Yeah.
not long for this world.
No.
Um,
Because that's
so
and
Edgar
Lockwood goes
dies
and
and Linton
visits.
dies.
Yes. Edgar dies, then Linton dies, and Heathwood is in charge of both houses.
Yes,
Because
and then that's when
yeah,
Lockwood comes into the picture because he needs a tenant for the Grange, and
yes.
so then now we're brought back into like the present day of
Hmm.
Lockwood's
Hmm.
narration.
And at this point, Lockwood has healed from whatever he's been dealing with for months, and so he decides to go and visit Wuthering Heights to try and be like and tell Heathcliff, hey, I'll pay through what I had agreed to because I already
Hmm.
have that side, but I'm leaving. And when he goes over, he observes Kathy just mocking tremendously Hareton's illiteracy. And Hareton has also been slowly trying to learn how to read. And
Hmm.
Kathy like makes fun of him for only knowing the letters in his name, but not knowing numbers. And then
Hmm.
Hareton like burns all these books. Like they have this huge like argument and fight over this. And and Heathcliff like also just comes in and is like, "You guys both look like Catherine, and I hate both of you for it. They both have Catherine's eyes." Um,
Right.
and
That's such a good
because
moment.
Hareton and Kathy are cousins,
Hmm.
because
Yes.
that's normal.
Yes.
Lockwood also has like this obsession with Kathy. He's like, what a fairy tale would have been if I were to go and save Catherine, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave. Like what? Lockwood, what are you doing?
It's odd. It's like they had like he perceived that they had a vibe from like I don't know, the whole like cross time, like,
Hmm.
his mother or her mother like tried to come into his,
Yeah.
haunt him. And now like there's this daughter, like, I don't
Yeah.
know what he's
And he's staring at a
romanticizing there,
portrait.
but
Yeah, who knows? But then so he leaves the Grange, and then we have 6 months later, Lockwood ends up being near on a traveling near. He's like, well, I'm already paying for this place. Might as well go stay at it. And so he goes to the Grange and it's kind of like boarded up, like in the way, not like abandoned, but in like no one's currently living there. And Nellie's not there. And so
Mhm.
he ends up finding out that Nellie's at Wuthering Heights now. So he goes and he visits Nellie, and Nellie starts telling another story of an update of the last 6 months. So as soon as
Mhm.
we're like away from that, we get thrown right back in.
She's back.
And we find out that Heathcliff has died and Kathy and Hareton are to be married, but then we find out how that really happens.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Heathcliff has like starts really noticing the eyes of like how Catherine and Hareton both had Catherine's eyes, and he starts spending more and more time out in the moors and not at Wuthering Heights. All while this is happening, Hareton and Catherine are like starting to become friendlier. Catherine is starting to teach Hareton how to read, and at this dinner, one of the last scenes with them all together, um, Heathcliff's getting frustrated because he's just, yelling abusive things at them and talking about Catherine's eyes. And Hareton stands up for Kathy in this moment and like tries to protect her. After that moment, Heathcliff just like loses all ambition for his revenge. Like
Hmm.
as soon as someone finally tried to stop him, he was able to like kind of let it go.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a really interesting way of having that start because I knew eventually Heathcliff died, but I did not realize it was this way. I assumed it was in a grand attempt of revenge or like wanting to be like heroic of some way. I thought it was going to be like a grand way, but
Hmm.
really he just becomes like reclusive and refuses to eat and
Hmm.
eventually just kind of starves himself to death. That kind of shocked me the way that he dies quietly, I want to describe it as.
Hmm. It,
He
it
like
is
is
really weird.
yeah.
And it's Nellie finds him dead.
Hmm.
And she goes up to the room that he's been sequestering himself in. Um, she sees that the window of his room is open, and of course it's a blustery and cold night. And she's like, "Well, that can't be good. Like,
Hmm.
we don't want the weather coming in." Um, and then she peeps in. Mr. Heathcliff was there, laid on his back. His eyes met mine, so keen and fierce. I started, and then he seemed to smile. I could not think him dead, but his face and throat were washed with rain, the bedclothes dripped, and he was perfectly still. The lattice, flapping to and fro, had grazed one hand that rested on the sill. No blood trickled from the broken skin, and when I put my fingers to it, I could doubt no more. He was dead and stark.
She like tries to like close his eyes too, but that they won't close. And she
Hmm.
describes his like smile or his face as almost like joyful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like Nellie talks about how she like used to be super superstitious, but now she's only kind of superstitious. And she's like,
Just
but she
kind
kind
of
of
a little
describes
stitious.
a little stitious. And she describes seeing that a ghost potentially and potentially Catherine's ghost. And
Hmm.
also like folks in town see like they talk about seeing the ghost of Heathcliff walking around the moors and then Kathy and Hareton end up getting married on New Year's Day. Um
Hmm.
and then and then Lockwood leaves and that's how the story ends. I found the ending so interesting for so many reasons because like with the Hareton and Kathy, them striking up their friendship that ends up becoming a more romantic relationship, it's really that Hareton is finally the one that is able to like stop that like continual generational trauma that is discussed
Hmm.
throughout this. And not even simple, because obviously it's a very brave and hard thing to do when you've been abused most of your life.
Hmm.
When he like stands up to protect Kathy, it like sparks something in Heathcliff to also just stop his
Hmm.
own cycle, which ends up bringing him towards death at the same time. So it's just so interesting, the end there.
Yeah. but like the implication that they are together in death, I think is
Yes.
also really interesting. Is like what his release from that like cycle of that like just relentless drive toward getting revenge. Once he's
Hmm.
freed from that, that's actually what's able to like bring him and Catherine together in some way, in some
Hmm.
weird kind of undead way. I
Hmm.
think that it's very ambiguous.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's like he finds some sort of relief or release, um, which I guess prevents it from maybe being quite as just kind of uncomplicated a tragedy if he had died like, in kind of the way that you had been talking earlier, like being
Hmm.
being murdered or having some like,
Hmm.
really kind of inglorious end.
Yeah. I liked that the book ended soft and we do have a happy-ish ending and that two characters are not dead and they are happily together with who they want to be married to.
Yes.
Um, should they be married? No, they're cousins. But you know what? It's 1850s, man.
It's a Victorian novel.
Yeah. But no one had tuberculosis, you know?
True.
But I just, I don't know. I really enjoyed reading this and how messy it was, but also there's so much to dive into. Like you could read this looking at just all the racial issues because
Hmm.
the way that Emily Bronte talks about race is still problematic, but she uses a lot of like Victorian slavery abolishing language. I'm using the wrong phrase there. Because like
Hmm.
the I believe enslaved folks were emancipated in England around this time. My
I
history
know it
is
was
off.
well before the US. I
Yes.
should, but do not
So
know the exact year.
it's probably like it was before the book was published, at least. Because like I know I I remember something I read in college also about in Jane Eyre there's a lot of like abolish language used
Mm,
on things. And so they
you're
are
right.
affected by, yeah.
1833.
Okay. So like but that's still like so you could read it through Lee, from like a racial lens of it, which is like throughout the whole novel with everything with Heathcliff. And then you can read it, it's one like obviously you can take any lens to read any novel, but this one I feel like has so much depth for it because there's also like all the women and motherhood, all the moms die.
Hmm.
Like that is and like it's barely on the page when they're dying in childbirth around childbirth. And I know the Bronte's mom
Yeah.
died when Emily was
Hmm.
3 or so, like young.
Yeah.
So like that's obviously very close to their family and
Yeah.
a big part of it. Just in general, like feminism and like what it is to be a woman in acceptable society of this time through this novel, classism,
Hmm.
like you could just go through so much about this, but then there's like obsession and revenge. It's just such a
Hmm.
deep novel. And I haven't read that in a while because I've been reading Heated Rivalry and hockey romance books. Those are not as deep. So like reading this was like almost like a breath of fresh air, and which is
Hmm.
weird because I would not describe this book as fresh air because it's so like haunted. I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole book is just saturated with,
Hmm.
very much a sense of decay and
Hmm.
darkness and wetness. Like everything is so wet and
Yes.
heavy and like you can imagine just how mildewy everything
Yes,
smells.
absolutely. As two
Like
girls from the rainforest, we understand the smells.
yes, we do. And there's maybe that's one of the reasons why we're like kind of we vibe with it. It's like there's kind of a comfort to it,
Yeah.
even insofar as it's kind of, like less than ideal in some
Hmm.
ways.
Yes, in many ways. And it's so messy and like it truly, I truly think it's like folks who love reality TV need to get into this book. Like
Hmm.
it's it's all hearsay. It's all secondhand accounts, if not third-hand accounts of the action. So who's
Hmm.
right, who's wrong was, with gossip, either it was not that bad or it was even worse, right? Like either they're making
Yeah.
it worse than it is or diminishing it. So like you don't really know and like are there ghosts? We don't know. Like
Hmm.
and I thought it was going to be way more ghosty than it was. And I'm glad that it wasn't
Yeah.
too ghosty. you know? Because if there's too much supernatural, then I'm like, okay, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a gothic novel, but it's not one that like I think about the terms that I'm forgetting the name of the scholar. This is embarrassing. But it's a scholar of Victorian Gothic who used these terms male and female Gothic to describe two
Hmm.
different kinds of Gothic deployed in the 19th century and like earlier too when the Gothic literature began as a movement
Hmm.
in the 18th century. But that male Gothic is the Gothic where like the supernatural is unavoidable. You can't explain it away.
Hmm.
There are ghosts, there are, undead entities, there are these, they're vampires, whatever it is. Whereas the female Gothic, things are explained at the end. So, like, there are weird,
Hmm.
footsteps in the hallway. There is, a family secret, but everything ends up getting explained. I don't know where I'd place Wuthering Heights on that
Yeah.
continuum. I mean, I think that it's maybe some kind of in an indeterminate state. I wouldn't be comfortable saying there's nothing ghostly going on.
Hmm.
But also like you could argue that everything is the result of like hallucination or nightmare. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know, but
Yeah.
I find myself thinking about those framings and how this doesn't really satisfy the requirements of a Gothic novel that is,
Yeah.
truly ghostly.
Hmm. No, yeah, definitely. I remember I'm trying to think of the scholar too because I took a Gothic lit class and
Yeah.
I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's been over 10 years since that happened. Um, I yeah, I think it definitely is definitely in the middle of that spectrum because like it is explained in that the way that they are living a hard life and they've all suffered abuse and have a lot of mental,
Hmm.
issues of a variety. So it's explained in that way.
Hmm.
And then like country townsfolk seeing a ghost on the moors just makes sense, you know?
Hmm.
Like, yeah, it's here, that's just like, oh yeah, there's a ghost over there. Don't go over there. It's like, okay.
Superstition.
Hmm.
Yeah, country superstitions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I had a blast and I was trying to
Yeah.
look up some fun facts. They're not really fun facts because the Bronte ladies had sad lives, as many people did in the Victorian era. It This is her only published novel, though she did co-write a collection of stuff with some of her sisters. It was sold to be published before Jane Eyre was published, but it wasn't published until after. But a lot of the success of the novel, people think it's because it's connected to Charlotte Bronte's stuff. Though the critics did not like this book when it first came out. They thought it was salacious, which understandable because it is. It is salacious. It was published under her pen name Ellis Bell. Emily Bronte ended up dying around age 30 to what I believe was tuberculosis. And she grew up, you know, it's set in a landscape very near where she grew up.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
and mhm,
the cover, those of you listening can't see, but the cover of my Norton edition has a photo of the moors. And it says cover illustration, photograph of a pathway Emily Bronte frequently walked when leaving her home village of Haworth to roam the nearby moorland.
mhm,
In her 1850 preface, Charlotte Bronte spoke of Wuthering Heights as, quote, rustic all through. It is moorish and wild and naughty as a rot of heath. So the picture on the front is like a very helpful way to like, if you're a reader
mhm,
who's very, very much like creates imagery or like likes having imagery to kind of enhance my imagination as I read. I love
mhm,
having that like
mhm,
landscape on the front and knowing that it's one that Emily Bronte knew so well, I think adds meaning to that.
mhm. And I'll see if I can find it, but I watched a video of someone doing like a little walkthrough of the town and like where the Brontes
Hmm.
lived and then the
Yeah.
church where their dad worked at and then the paths that go into the moors. I'll see if I can find that video. And if I
Yeah.
do, it'll be linked in the description.
Yeah.
Uh,
Didn't they, you might not know this, didn't they
mhm.
have a cemetery within view of the house? Because I guess if their father
Yes.
was at the church, it was their parsonage. So they had a
Yes.
graveyard in the backyard, which I think explains so much about the
So
psychology
much.
of literally all the Brontes.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Like, yeah. It makes sense that their dad was in charge of a parsonage and also that their mother died young and also that they're
Mhm.
growing up in the Victorian area. So like of course Gothic gals were coming out in that era. Uh
Mhm.
but also just the setting. It just makes sense.
Yes, it was inevitable. Like, what
Yeah.
else are you going to do? When you have a graveyard, you're going to make use of having of that kind of
Hmm.
childhood, right?
Hmm. Yeah, awesome. I am so excited to watch the movie.
Me
And
too.
I'll save my thoughts on why I'm so excited to watch the movie for next episode, listeners. We are watching or we will be discussing the Emerald Fennel movie, but I am also going to try and watch at least the 2011 adaptation that came out.
Yeah.
Um, my library does not have it, but I think it's on Tubi, so I'll watch some
Hmm.
ads and I'll watch it. And I kind of want to watch the old black and white one just because I like watching old black and white movies because I just think they're fun.
Yeah.
So if I can find my hands on that, I'm gonna try and watch it. But if we do a little like report back on those in the next episode, but it won't be our main focus.
Cool.
Thanks again, Spencer, for being on the pod.
Thank you. So much
Yeah.
fun. Can't wait to talk about the movie next
Oh,
time.
I'm so excited. Thank you, listeners, for listening. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Read the Book First Podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to your preferred podcast platform. Rate us 5 stars. If it's not 5 stars, don't worry about it. And remember, read the book first.